Europeans made up the Middle East, and they did it the way they do everything, by lying, renaming, redrawing, and detonating with maps, treaties, and bombs. There was no Middle East before Europe needed it to exist. Not in language, not in geography, not in any indigenous worldview. The people of the region called it Bilad al-Sham, the lands of the north, or Greater Syria, al-Mashriq, or the east, Al-Jazeera, the island, Kazakhstan, Hijaz, Yemen, Kufa, Basra, Jund, Filastin, not the middle of the east of Europe. The very phrase Middle East was a colonial hallucination, coined by American naval officer Alfred Thayer Mahan in 1902, popularized by British colonial planners in the decades that followed, and locked into place by the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916. That was the moment two European powers, France and Britain, secretly divided the lands of the collapsing Ottoman Empire between themselves like hyenas circling a wounded lion. France got Syria and Lebanon, which they invented as a Maronite majority enclave in 1920 to reward their preferred Christian population. Britain got Iraq, Transjordan, now Jordan, and Palestine, where they opened the door to Zionist settlement as payment for World War I alliances, igniting a century-long catastrophe still unfolding. There was no Iraq, there was no Jordan, there was no Israel. There was only the collapsing Ottoman Vilayet system. Baghdad, Mosul, Basra, provinces with tribal networks, religious courts, confederated power. And when the Ottomans fell, the Europeans didn't restore what had existed. They fabricated new states, inserted puppet monarchies like the Hashemite family in both Iraq and Jordan, and drew borders so illogical they ran through rivers, deserts, and people. They split up Kurdistan across 4 nations, divided the Druze, bisected Sunni and Shia communities, trapped Palestinians in a settler colonial nightmare, and turned Lebanon into a confessional time bomb by freezing religious representation into a colonial power-sharing gridlock. And they justified all of it by claiming to be bringing civilization to people who had libraries, while their own ancestors were still chasing pigs through mud. They called it Middle East because they couldn't see anything unless it was in relation to themselves. India was the Far East, Europe was the center, so this region became the middle, not based on its own historical gravity, just its proximity to European greed. And the phrase worked. It flattened thousands of years of history. Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, Ayyubid, Fatimid, Umayyad, into a single vague region where white men could play empire like a game of Risk. They turned sacred pilgrimage routes into colonial railways, multilingual cities like Aleppo and Baghdad into military outposts, inland trade networks into oil concessions, or companies like Anglo-Persian Oil, now BP. And when people resisted, they called them terrorists. They crushed uprisings with gas, like the British did to Iraqis in the 1920s. They bombed Damascus, occupied Cairo, besieged Fallujah, and called it order. So no, the Middle East is not ancient, it's not cultural, it's not real. It's a European invention, born of petroleum, paranoia, and post-war partition. What is real? Al-Quds, Basra, Sana'a, Shiraz, cradle of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, architecture, theology, the lands of Ibn Khaldun and Al-Farabi, of the Banu Musa and the House of Wisdom. They didn't need to be named. They already were. But the moment Europe arrived, they were renamed, reframed, and blamed for everything Europe broke Europeans made up the Middle East to carve civilizations into oil fields, divide unity into borders, and collapse empires that dared to govern without white approval. And the only thing older than the term Middle East is the blood spilled every time someone tries to reclaim what Europe tried to erase. Cope.